Okay, let's talk about 3D, the Consumer Price Index. I need to apologize to you guys first because there were all kinds of typos, and that's completely my fault from last night. And just getting in a hurry and probably brain freeze. I'm going to blame it on Snowvid. But anyway, let's go ahead and just start from scratch and talk about the Consumer Price Index. Okay, well, what is the Consumer Price Index? It is an economic indicator that measures inflation. Now, we know prices go up all the time, and or most of the time, but what is it really in comparison to? And, you know, how much has it gone up? Has my pay gone up enough to compensate for prices going up, that sort of thing? And here's what they do. They have government employees who their job is shopping. And they go to stores all over the country and they buy different things. So they'll look at a head of lettuce, or they will look at a package of diapers, or, you know, whatever their particular task is. And they will find what the average cost is. It all goes into a formula where they put all these products together and they come out with a number that tells us how things have gone up. Now, the table for the Consumer Price Index this is the big thing that got me into trouble when I was retyping this, is because I started out in 1981 and have gone up to the present of 2020. On this, you can see that in 1981, the CPI was 90.9. If you look at the values between 82, 83, and 84, these values here, the average is 100. So that's kind of our baseline. So now it makes sense that chances are nearly every year it's going to go up. Okay, but these are all kinds of things. The cost of living, if you have parents or grandparents who are on Social Security, it will change based on the cost of living increase. And I'm sure you've heard that said in referring to pay. Okay. But in general, the CPI increases, and this is called inflation. When the CPI decreases, it's called deflation. So what are some ways that the CPI and inflation could affect your life? Well, it will impact your rent, utilities, groceries, your pay. Now, there is one year in here that I want to point out to you where the CPI decreased, and that was in 2009. If you'll notice, in 2009, notice every year it's going up and up and up, and then it goes down. So I don't know if many of you were children in 2009, some of you were adults, but if you think about what happened there was a big old housing bubble and it burst. And in fact, then that caused a recession. Now, you'll notice in 2020, it still went up, and it went up quite a bit. Could the increase have been caused by COVID? What will happen this year? Could COVID possibly cause us to go into a recession in the future? Who knows? But those are some things that can happen. Okay, so if we want to compare the prices for two different years, we compare the CPIs. And there's a little formula for this. So we're going to use this from this table. And what we are going to do is we want to find out how much higher were prices in 2008 than in 1981. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Okay, we've got our formula. The CPI in 2008 is going to equal X times the CPI in 1981. So let's just find those values. All right, so the CPI in 2008 was 215.3. Now that is going to be equal to X times the CPI in 1981. So in 1981, the CPI was 90.9. Now we remember from doing earlier percent problems, in order to get the X by itself, if I have it multiplied times something, I'm going to have to divide by that to undo it. So X is going to be equal to 215.3 divided by 90.9, which gives us 2.37. Okay. That tells us that the prices in 2008 were 2.37 times those in 1981. But now we also remember from an earlier section when we were comparing values that we can also express this as a percent. So we can also say that the prices in 2008 were 237% of those in 1981. Remember, times is just the percent of turned into a decimal. Okay, so we're going to continue to need our chart, so I'm going to go ahead and just fold this over so that I can use it. And we are going to look at a couple of different formulas. All right, so if I want to talk about adjusting for inflation, if I want to know, okay, well, if something cost this amount in the year 2000, what should it cost now? Is it following inflation? Is it higher than inflation? Is it less than inflation? But that's where we're going to start with it. Okay, so this would be, X is going to be the reference year, which means that Y is going to be the compared year. So the price in the compared year is equal to the price in the reference year divided by the CPI in the compared divided by the CPI in the reference. Now notice here you want to end up with Y. So this is kind of like some of the other stuff that we've looked at. It's not really canceling units, but we want to get rid of the price and the CPI in the year X. So those are going to cancel out, and all we're going to have left is Y. All right, so let's go ahead and start this. If a car costs $4,500 in 1985, what is the price in 2008? Now again, remember this was confusing yesterday because of my typos. Okay, so let's see. In 2008, we already have that. So we've got in 2008, we want to know what is its price in 2008. So that is going to be our compared value. Our compared value. Now we know that the car cost $4,500 in 1985, so that is going to be our reference value. So this is going to be our X, and this is going to be our Y. So now we just fill it into the formula. So the price in 2008 is going to be the price in 1985 times the CPI in 2008 divided by the CPI in 1985. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to put it over 1 because we're dealing with fractions. Okay, so I know that the price in 2008 is $4,500. Whoops, I used the wrong. Okay, so that's in 1985. I am doing it right. Okay, and I also know that the CPI for that year is 107.6. I'm going to put this over 1. In 2008, I know that the CPI is 215.3, and what I want to know is the price in 2008 based on this value. Okay, so if I do all of my multiplication, and this is what I'm trying to find, the price in 2008, when I do my calculations, I end up with $4,500 and $1,985 is worth $9,004.18. It may have been 16, I don't know. No, it's 18 in 2008 dollars. Which means a car that cost $4,500 in 1985, the same car should cost $9,004.18. Of course, we all know that there are different things and all these things that will change. Okay. All right. Now, how do we calculate the rate of inflation? How much are prices grown between two different years? All right, so we are going to look at this, and we're just going to use the relative change formula. Okay, but what we're comparing is in those years is the CPI. So the rate of inflation is just the compared value minus the reference value over the reference value, and you may want to make note of that, which is the compared minus the reference divided by the reference. Okay, so we want to find the rate of inflation between 1985 and 2008. Okay, so what is the reference year? That is where we're starting, so our reference year is going to be 1985. So our reference year is 1985. Our compared year is 2008. Okay, because we want to know the inflation rate between these. If we start at 1985 and end at 2008, what is the rate of inflation? Okay, so if I want to find my rate of inflation, then I'm going to take the CPI in my compared year minus the CPI in my reference year and divide that by the CPI in my reference year. Okay, so my compared value is 2008. And I see from my chart that this is 215.3. My reference year is 1985, and the CPI is 107.6, and that's what's in my denominator as well. Okay. Now remember, as you're doing this, if you're doing it in your calculator, make sure that before you divide, you combine these in some way. Either do the subtraction, hit enter, and then divide, or whatever your calculator steps allow. Okay, so what do I get when I do this? I end up with 1.00. It's 1.000 something. but the rate of inflation is normally a percent, which means it's 100%. Now, if I look at this and go back up here, if your inflation is 100%, if something in 1985 cost $4,500, it should cost $9,000 in 2008. That supports the 100% increase. 100% means you double it. Okay. All right, so some practice problems. We want to complete the following to answer the questions. It says, if you need $30,000 to live comfortably in 2005, what would you have needed in 1985? Okay, so what have they given us? They've given us what's going on in 2005. So in 2005, so $30,000 to live comfortably in 2005. So if I look at my table in 2005, I can see what the CPI is. What would we have needed in 1995? Well, let's see. In 1995, I can also find this. Okay, so our reference year is now 2005, and our compared year is 1995. Okay, so adjusting for inflation, let's see what we've got here. Let's use our adjusting for inflation. We're going to have to find the values. Okay, so to find the value, the price in 1995, I'm going to take the price in 2005. So that's going to be 30,000. I'm going to put it over 1. And I know from the table that my CPI for that is 195.3. So I'm going to put that in my denominator. Again, so the reference year cancels. Then I am going to put the CPI for my compared year here. All right, so these two are my reference year. This is my compared year. Okay, now let's think about this. If we're going backwards, if we're starting with 2005 and going back to 1995, let's just think before we do this. Is the value expected to be more or less? Well, if I do my mathemagic on it, this becomes $23,410.14. And that kind of makes sense because it should cost us less in 1995 than it did in 2005. Okay. A box of diapers cost $3 in 1982. What was the price in 2005? Okay, so we want to find the price in 2005. And we are given what's going on in 1982. Which means that 1982 is going to be our reference value, and this is going to be our compared value. What we're doing here is we are adjusting for inflation. So we're going to use that formula. Okay, so we know that the price in 2005 is going to be equal to the price in 1982 times the CPI in 2005 divided by the CPI in 1982. Okay, so, and I'm going to go ahead and do this in here. Let's see what we've got here. I know from my table I've got what's going on in 1982 and I know what's going on in 1985. Okay, so in 1982 the price was $3 and the CPI was 96.5. In 2005 the CPI is 195.3. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and put this over 1. So when I do this calculation, I end up with $6.08. So it more than doubled. Okay. All right, so now our last thing that we want to do is find the rate of inflation. Okay. And between 2005 and 2020, I'm out of color, so I'm going to have to go to green again. In 2020. Okay. So 2005 is going to be my reference value, and 2020 I'm going to be comparing it. I want to go between 2005 to 2020. Okay, so just to reiterate the formula, I'm going to use the CPI from 2020 minus the CPI for 2005 divided by the CPI for 2005. Okay. From my table, I know all these values. The CPI in 2020 is 258.8. In 2005, it's 195.3. And I divide by 195.3. Once again, make sure you do this subtraction before you do your division. And my result is 0.325 or 32.5%. Okay, with the worksheet all fixed up, I hope this was helpful and make it just a little bit easier. Okie doke.